Hi there, and welcome to Oaklandside 510. I'm Tasneem Raja, Editor-in-Chief of the Oaklandside, Oakland's independent, non-profit newsroom. In today's episode, the California Public Records Act is supposed to guarantee transparency in government, but an Oaklandside investigation found that most Oakland City Council members are routinely violating this law, ignoring requests, responding months late, or claiming that they don't have records that we know they do. Investigative reporter Eli Wolf is going to join me on that. But first, Oaklandside editor Darwin Bongram and I will catch you up on some other stories the Oaklandside reported this week, including breaking news on a major federal immigration operation headed to the San Francisco Bay Area. Let's get into it. Okay, I'm sitting down here with Darwin Bongram, Oaklandside's senior news editor. It's Wednesday at 3 p.m. when we're recording, and we just published a big story related to immigration in Oakland. Tell us what's going on.
Yeah, this is one of those crazy news days where you think, it's going to be quiet and I can just do some work. And then suddenly, boom, some huge news breaks. In this case, it sounds like the Bay Area is about to become the focus of Trump administration efforts that we've seen in Washington, D.C., in Los Angeles, in Chicago, and other cities. We're hearing that the Trump administration is sending federal agents from the Customs and Border Protection Agency to the Bay Area for some kind of large-scale operation.
Okay, where are they going? What are you hearing?
Yeah, we talked to the Coast Guard, and we've talked to other federal agencies and some local and federal officials. And what we're learning is that these agents are going to be stationed out of the, it's called the Coast Guard Island. It's part of the city of Alameda, but it's on its own little island next to Alameda. They're going to be stationed there, and from that point, they're going to go out into the community and carry out some kind of operation. We don't know what that is yet.
Yep. As I said, we're recording this Wednesday at 3 p.m. This podcast comes out early on Friday morning. A lot will have happened between now and then. So folks, I urge you to go to oaklandside.org to stay updated. Darwin, tell listeners a little bit about what we're planning to do tomorrow.
Yeah, our reporters are going to be covering a lot of different angles of this. We're going to be talking to people in the community. We're going to be checking in with local elected officials and other leaders in the region, with law enforcement agencies. We're going to be keeping a watch on the Coast Guard Island, and we're going to be keeping a watch out for any kind of immigration operations that happen. We're also going to be following some of the protest activity and movements that it sounds like are about to be kicked off on a major scale.
Okay, thank you. All right, folks, again, stay in touch with this news at oaklandside.org, and we'll keep reporting. With that, Darwin, I think let's get into some other recent reporting from our newsroom. Let's start with some good news from our education beat. Ashley McBride has been covering the lead contamination crisis in Oakland schools for over a year now. And Darwin, there's finally some real progress to report.
Yeah, it seems so. This is a story where we've seen the district really turn things around after some serious accountability reporting. District officials announced this week that drinking water at 70 of Oakland Unified's 76 schools now meet lead safety standards. They're testing below the district's safe threshold of 5 parts per billion for lead.
Testing below means safer, right?
Yep.
And I know that can be a little confusing. And, this is significant progress from where things stood last year when Ashley first broke this story. Can you remind listeners what happened?
In August 2024, the Oaklandside revealed that routine water testing had found elevated lead levels at dozens of school sites. In some cases, this was 100 times higher than the district standard. The district had done the testing in spring and summer of 2024, but most students, families, and staff weren't actually notified until August or September after we started asking questions.
We know lead poisoning is especially dangerous for children. It can cause developmental delays and learning disabilities. So this was a serious health concern and a major transparency failure. Is that fair to say?
Right. And the district made promises last fall to be more transparent, to provide filtered water stations and reusable bottles, and to do comprehensive testing. According to Ashley's latest reporting, they've been following through. Over the summer, the district tested nearly 6,800 samples. That's every water fountain, filtered water station, and kitchen sink across all the schools.
That is good to hear. What else? What else is the district doing differently now?
And they've added 60 more of these filtered water stations. They're building a new dashboard to display test results in a way that will be easy for the public to understand. And they're creating an automated notification system so principals will know when testing is happening at their school. Last year, as Ashley reported, just one person was responsible for coordinating testing, repairs, and communications about lead for more than 60 schools. That's kind of what led to the communications breakdown to begin with.
Yeah, we know that the school board allocated over $20 million in March to fund these lead remediation efforts. That's a big investment. It sounds like they are making some measurable progress. I know that Ashley will keep following the story and we will keep you updated. Now, Darwin, you and several of our reporters covered the No King's Day protests that happened last weekend. Thousands upon thousands of people turned out. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, organizers of the march estimated that more than 10,000 people showed up on Saturday. I was there, and I would say, it was possibly more than 10,000 by a lot. It was one of the biggest protest marches I've been to in Oakland, and I've been to quite a few. People gathered at Wilmington Park in Chinatown, and then they marched to a rally at the Lake Merritt Amphitheater. Nationally, the organizing group Indivisible counted up to 7 million people across 2,500 cities and towns all over the country. This turned out as a sign of a growing movement in opposition to what protesters view as increasing authoritarianism from the Trump administration.
Yeah, Mayor Barbara Lee spoke at that rally last weekend. Tell us what she had to say.
She was defiant. She told the crowd, quote, "We are not subjects. We are the people. We are the people who will not bow to any king."
The atmosphere looked pretty festive in the photos. We saw people playing music. We saw costumes, these inflatable animal suits.
Yeah, a lot of people had these cartoony inflatable suits, which were similar to what protesters in Portland have used. What they're doing up there is they're sort of like pushing back on Trump's characterization of Portland as a war zone. It's hard to call something a war zone when there's like a fluffy unicorn dancing around, The protest had all this energy, but it also had seriousness to it.
Yeah. I know House Speaker Mike Johnson condemned these protests, right, as, quote, hate America rallies. But I saw a lot of American flags in those photos.
Yeah, there were. The No Kings message is fundamentally patriotic. America has no kings, and the power belongs to the people, is what the organizers are saying. Attendees we talked to, including veterans, said they came out to defend democracy, to support immigrants, and to stand up for constitutional rights. Yeah,
so all of this connects to Esther Kaplan's reporting. Esther is our deputy editor here at the Oaklandside. She's been documenting various ways people are organizing. Can you give us some highlights from her guide, Darwin?
Oh, yeah. Esther's guide is super comprehensive. She profiles all these different ways in which people from the East Bay are getting involved, depending on their comfort level and availability. For example, the Interfaith Movement for Human Integrity, this group has been doing vigils outside of immigration courts in San Francisco and Concord. They're not there to protest or chant. They wear prayer stoles. They bring coffee and snacks, hold signs, and offer what they call street chaplaincy to the people who are showing up for these court appointments. Anyone can sign up for a 2-hour shift.
It kind of reminds me of, people who are seeking abortion services at clinics.
Yeah, there are definitely parallels there. And then there are court watchers. These are volunteers who show up at San Francisco's immigration courthouse in downtown San Francisco to observe proceedings and accompany immigrants who arrive alone and who might be nervous. They've been doing this for months, and they're celebrating 13 consecutive Tuesdays with no ICE abductions on those days when they're there. They think having a visible presence has made a difference. There's also the National Day Labor Organizing Network's Adopt a Corner campaign. This is where volunteers commit to regularly showing up at places like Home Depot, where day laborers gather. They build relationships and offer protection to day laborers. The idea is to be present and consistent and have relationships in place if ICE raids target a city. And Bay Resistance, This group is organizing what they call pods. These are groups of like 10 to 20 neighbors or other people who have some sort of affinity or community already. And they can mobilize quickly if needed, whether that's like showing up when federal troops are deployed or just staying connected and informed. They've already got 70 pods, mostly in the East Bay. Esther's guide has all the details on how to join and what to expect at these different events.
All right, Darwin, our Nosh team has also been reporting on some exciting restaurant and cafe openings around Oakland. Look, I think it's important to shout out what's going on in our food scene right now, too.
Life goes on. Good things are happening. First, Eve's Waterfront is back. Mm-hmm. The restaurant on the Embarcadero closed for several years after a kitchen fire. They're celebrating their grand reopening this weekend. They're doing a raffle where someone can win free brunch for an entire year. Also, the coffee scene is really active right now. Temescal Alley has a new spot called Alleyway Cafe in the old CRO cafe space. Then there's Olivia Coffee and Flower Uptown, which has these really beautiful Korean-inspired specialty drinks. Their banana milk latte comes topped with half a caramelized banana, and they're planning to sell fresh-cut flowers, too.
I know you also have a couple new sit-down spots to tell listeners about.
Yeah, Leo's Diner. This just opened uptown. It's from Leo Lobo, who runs The Hatch next door.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, this is a classic diner breakfast, open till 3 p.m. There's also Marin's Kitchen and Coffee downtown, which does breakfast sandwiches and lunch. And last but not least, the team behind Secrets of Tiger in Emeryville. They just opened Payak up in Montclair. They're focusing on Thai grilling methods, cooking over high heat on a charcoal grill.
Our Nosh team is always on top of the Oakland food scene. And of course, restaurants are enormously impacted by, what's going on with immigration in this country. You can find all of these stories and more of our restaurant coverage at oaklandside.org. Okay, that is it for headlines. We're going to link to all of this reporting in the show notes. Let's go to our deep dive conversation. All right, let's get into today's deep dive conversation, an investigation into how Oakland's elected officials handle public records requests. Oaklandside reporters Natalie Ornstein and Eli Wolf found that most of Oakland City Council members are regularly violating a state transparency law, either responding to document requests weeks or months late, providing incomplete responses, or ignoring requests altogether. To help me understand what they found and why it matters, I'm joined by Eli Wolf. Natalie Ornstein is on vacation this week. Eli, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, Eli, let's start with the basics. What is the California Public Records Act? Who uses it, and why does it matter?
Yeah, so this is a law that's been on the books for several decades. It basically establishes the right to access state and local public records. It lays out the rules that agencies need to follow when they get a request for records. And all records are considered public unless an agency asserts an exemption. So that means things like records of meetings and memos, stuff you might expect, but also things like communications between government officials and lobbyists through emails and text messages. As for who uses it, it's everybody. It's journalists like myself. It's members of the public who maybe are trying to get planning records or a police report from their local government. It's lawyers. It's really everyone.
Okay, so tell us how it works. How do the records get asked for and how do those asks get fulfilled?
Yeah, so it's pretty simple, at least on paper. Any official, elected or otherwise, is legally required to send a requester a notice within 10 calendar days saying whether or not they have any records relevant to their request. Officials can extend that deadline by 14 days, but then they need to tell you. After they have made a determination, a public agency doesn't have any hard requirement on whether or not they release records within a specific time frame, but they're not supposed to obstruct or delay releasing those records. So the spirit of the law is really they're supposed to give it to you sooner than later.
Okay. So one way or the other, they're supposed to respond within 10 days. What is actually happening to our newsroom's requests to Oakland City Council members?
At a very high level, what we found is that the council members aren't doing a good job adhering to the law. We found that of the 91 requests that we filed with the council members, in only 13 cases did we get that determination within 10 days. So that's a bunch of cases where they broke the law. And again, they don't have a legal obligation to turn over records within time frame, but we found that of those 91 requests that we filed, dating some back to 2023, council members only completed 36 of them, which is about 39% of the total.
You guys found that council member Noel Gallo has the worst track record. Tell us about that.
Yeah, we filed 14 requests with Gallo's office between 2023 and 2025. He has never told us in any of those requests whether or not he has records, and we've only actually received records in response to 2 of those requests. So 2 out of 14, not great.
Okay, Eli, what kinds of records has Councilmember Gallo failed to provide?
We have asked Gallo multiple times for copies of his calendar, showing who he meets with and what he's doing on a daily basis as an elected official. We have tried to get communications between him and lobbyists for a recycling company, communications about a council resolution on energy, and about a security contract. So a lot of stuff.
Council President Kevin Jenkins has also had real issues with compliance. What has stood out to you about his office's handling of requests?
Yeah, we have filed 25 records requests with Jenkins' office, and he has completed 6 of them, which is also concerning because on top of being council president, he was previously the interim mayor of Oakland. So he sets the bar for how other officials should be behaving when it comes to this law. There's a lot of stuff he hasn't turned over. We asked for records of his communications with a lobbyist for Northeastern regarding the creation of a private police force. We asked him for records around OPD's pursuit policy and some of the communications around wanting to change it. And we asked him for text messages with San Francisco Mayor Daniel Lurie, who we believe he had communications with earlier this year. None of those have been addressed.
And you guys reported that Jenkins claimed he didn't have some specific records that you later confirmed he did possess. What happened there?
Yeah, this happened a couple times, and I found it pretty concerning. We learned that some lobbyists had contacted Jenkins on behalf of Airbnb, so we asked for communications between anyone in his office, including Jenkins and those lobbyists. His staff responded that they didn't have any records, but later, while looking through records that were turned over to a different person, we discovered a bunch of emails between one of those lobbyists and Jenkins. It's possible that they missed those emails when they were combing through his inbox, but that was a pretty big red flag to us.
You found that other council members have much better track records, including one newly elected council member, Zach Unger. So this tells me it's not impossible to follow this law. You know, the folks who are complying, what are they doing differently?
Yeah, so one thing I'll say off the bat is that, to be fair, Unger, unlike some of the other council members I mentioned, is a fairly new member of the city council, and we've sent him fewer requests than some of the others. But you're right. I mean, this isn't rocket science. Unger told us that he has a staffer who jumps on requests as soon as they come in, and his philosophy is to respond to them immediately. So he makes them a priority. This isn't to say that Unger doesn't have critiques of the California Public Records Act. He pointed out that someone sent a request to his office for every email that mentioned fire, which, he's a former firefighter. So
Right.
This produced a lot of messages, and it's incredibly burdensome. And it required him or a staffer to go through and redact a bunch of personal info from those emails. But he pointed out that the law is the law. There's not a lot of wiggle room when it comes to complying with it.
So what happens when the elected officials just ignore the law? I mean, I have to think the enforcement mechanisms in place must be pretty weak if officials can just routinely violate a law without much happening to them. I mean, you said you've had requests that have just sat there for years. Eli, what's going on here?
Yeah, there isn't really an enforcement mechanism for it. The act itself, my understanding is it doesn't have a provision that says if an official violates the law, they have to pay a fine or go to jail. Really, it's just a law that is there to remind public officials that public records are, something that they need to turn over to the public when asked. The only real way to enforce the law is to sue the agency that you believe is withholding records or denying records improperly. And that can be a very costly endeavor that isn't available to most people.
We have resorted to it. If you're interested, check out a previous episode of this podcast where we talk about how the Oaklandside fights for freedom of information and your access to some of this information. So Some council members did respond to your requests for comment on this story. The folks who aren't complying. What did they say about why they're not complying with the law?
Yeah, so in general, what they said is that requests require too much time, too much staff work. They don't have the right amount of resources to deal with this, that they have other priorities dealing with their constituents. I would say that the word that you hear a lot from the folks who don't comply with it is that it just feels burdensome.
Now, I know you had an interesting exchange with council member Carol Fife when you reached out to her for your story.
Yeah, so Fife didn't actually grant us an interview, but after we reached out, she posted a video on Instagram where she explained her office's process for handling requests, which was really helpful to actually look through and had some interesting stuff in it. She, like I just said, she complained about those requests being burdensome. One example that she shared was that she had received a request in November 2023 for all communications with her office about a resolution calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. This is a really controversial resolution. A lot of people were sending the council emails. Fife said she had received thousands of emails and that her office would have had to go through and redact, personal info before releasing them to the public. She didn't identify the requester who sent this to her office. I did file 2 requests with her office around that time about that resolution. She has never responded to either of those requests. I filed them, I can't remember the exact number of days ago, but like 650 plus days ago. And I sent the same request to other council members at the time who didn't have any problem responding. So you can make of that what you will.
Now, I know we've also sent the city attorney's office a good number of public records requests, and that office actually has had a pretty good response rate, better than most of the council members. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, maybe this isn't surprising, but the city's lawyer does a better job adhering to the law than a lot of other officials.
Sure.
We filed 39 requests with the city attorney. They completed 38 of them and partially completed the last one. Granted, the city attorney has more staff than other council members, so they have more people to handle requests. But it also shows, I think, that they take these requests seriously. And it raises questions for me about why council members aren't going to the city attorney for help processing requests.
Is that an option that they have?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I would love to see us report more on, whether that's an option and, why they aren't pursuing it if it is. Okay, Eli, close us out here. Why should Oakland residents care about this? What is at stake when elected officials don't comply with transparency laws?
Yeah, these laws exist so that the public can see what government officials are saying and doing and hold them accountable for their actions. In Oakland, establishing and maintaining that trust is really important. It's important anywhere, but especially here. Folks may recall our former mayor was indicted earlier this year for bribery. A consistent complaint that I hear from folks is that they think our government is corrupt and they're suspicious of their elected representatives. A really good way to address that perception and to correct it is to make sure that those same people have access to the records that tell them what their representatives are doing.
If I'm a regular Oakland resident and a council member ignores my public records request, what can I do about it?
You can send them a message on the public records platform Next Request or contact the liaison handling your request. And if you're not getting traction, CC the city attorney and also consider reaching out to us. It's my professional job and sort of my hobby following this issue. So I'm very interested in knowing about requests that are getting dusty.
Okay. Eli, thank you so much to you and Natalie Ornstein for your reporting here and for taking the time to talk to us about it.
Thank you so much.
This is really important accountability work, and I know that Natalie and Eli are going to keep following this story. 510 listeners, you can read the full investigation at oaklandside.org, where we've published all the details about which council members are and aren't complying with public records law. All right, that's this week's episode of Oaklandside 510. Huge thanks to everyone who helped us reach our $15,000 fundraising goal. Because of you, we're going to be bringing you weekly episodes of this podcast for the next 6 months. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen. Share it with your Oakland friends and neighbors. The more people listening, the more we can justify keeping this show going long term. You can find all the stories we talked about today at oaklandside.org. Sign up for our daily newsletter to get our reporting delivered straight to your inbox. Thanks to Darwin Bongram for bringing us the headlines. Thank you, Eli Wolf, for your insights into how Oakland officials are defying public records law. This episode was produced by Callie Rhodes, edited by Esther Kaplan, and hosted by me, Oaklandside Editor-in-Chief Tasneem Raja. On behalf of our entire newsroom, thank you for showing up for Oakland. We'll see you next week.